Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today, I would like to talk about a topic that's been on my mind for quite a few months. I really didn't know how to actually um, explain this or talk to you about. The topic is brand. What is brand and why is it important? This is one of my favorite topics, and I hope you find this video very useful. So, what is brand? I've been in many discussions regarding branding on projects across many different companies, and all you will hear is, about the logo, the branding colors, the fonts, the wording we use in our marketing collateral. So let me make it very clear to you: brand is not just a logo. It's much more than that. It's much, much more than that. Then what exactly is it? Okay, so let's be very clear about one thing. There's marketing and then there's brand. Marketing, if I have to put it very crassly, is, you know, buy me. I'm good. I'm better than the others. I'm cheaper. I'm faster. Buy me, buy me. Okay, the customer comes and buys your product. Now, will the customer come back and buy the product for the rest of his life? Or will they not come back? That's branding. Will the customer recommend your product to someone else? That's branding. So just to give you an example that probably helps you understand it better. Once I was about to go to a cafe on a Sunday. It was a special lunch with one of my close friends. I was treating them for my birthday. And one of my colleagues said, "You must go to this awesome cafe. It's called The Grounds. Apparently, there's something called the avocado mash, which is very popular, very tasty." And she was highly recommending this to me. She was telling this beautiful story about this brand, a very positive one. You see, that's what brand is. As Jeff Bezos says, brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's all those stories people are talking about in your absence. That's brand. So there are two elements to the brand. There's the identity. You say, this is what we are as a company. These are the values we hold or we represent, etc., etc., etc. That's your identity. Now that is what you control as a company. But then there is another side to it as well. The perceptions, the feelings, the emotions your product or your service or your company evokes in the outside public. You don't control that. That's branding too. So how do we control that? How do we control what people say about your company, your product, or your service? You can't. Then what do? Well, you can do something else. You can increase the likelihood of them telling the stories that you want them to tell about your brand and around the values that you represent. Let me repeat. You can't control their perceptions or the stories they tell, but you can increase the likelihood of them telling the stories that you want them to tell and the values around the values that you represent. So, in order for this to occur, there's one and only one way. There's not two ways, there's not four ways, there's one way. And I'm going to talk about how that's going to happen. So, before we get into that, we need to have an understanding of a concept called brand idea and brand values. So let me talk about brand idea. So when you think about, let's say, Volvo, what's the first thing that comes in your mind? What's a single idea that comes in your mind? Safety. When you think about Toyota, what comes in your mind? Reliability. When you think about Airbnb, what comes in your mind? Budget accommodation. You see, the internal understanding of the organization may be complex, but the external understanding of your company is always very simple. Often it's reduced to one single idea or word, sometimes a couple of words, but the concept is it's mostly reduced to one single idea. So you need, as a company, to be very, very clear about who you are as a company. What is your brand idea? It can't be four things, it can't be five things. It has to be a single thing. Pick one. Now, to make it more clear, the founder of Entourage always says this over and over and over again in almost every video. You can't be everything to everybody. If you try to be everything to everybody, you will end up being nothing to nobody. That is so apt in the situation. So pick a single brand idea and be good at it. So in order for you to be able to increase the likelihood, there's a few things you have to do. Number one, you need to have a very clear idea. You need to have clarity around what your brand idea is and your brand values are. Often in companies, there is not a real good understanding around this. When I say understanding, that means everybody in the company needs to be on board around what your brand idea is and what your brand values are. No ambiguity. That's the number one, clarity. Number two is when these brand values are represented in every act you perform. When these brand values are represented in every act you perform, then when the customer experiences those values in your product and service, you increase the likelihood that they probably will tell those positive stories around your brand and around the values they have experienced. That's the only way. When I talk about represent these brand values in every act you perform, what do I mean by this? When somebody calls your reception and you pick up the phone, and how you address that call. When somebody calls your customer support, or when somebody calls your technical support, the negotiations that happen during pre-sales process, your sales process, every single thing you do, even when you do your product design, your product build, your testing, and your release. So these brand values have to be represented in everything you do. Often there is inconsistency and discontinuity between what the brand values are and what the product is saying. The brand says, for example, I'm going to provide I'm a premium brand. I'm going to have this cutting-edge technology, but then your product is providing a very below average service. You don't want to have this discontinuity, because when your customers experience this average service, you know what kind of stories they're going to tell about your brand. So it's really, really important to have that clarity, and you need to come up with a set of practices that ensure that your brand values are represented in every act you perform, operational, non-operational. So why am I making this video? Because I want you to think about brand every time you do something in your company. When you pick up the phone call, what happens after you put down the phone call with your client or customer? When you have sold the product, they have implemented it, you've done the handover and you walked away. When you're designing a product, when you're building a product, when you're testing a product, I want you to think about brand, what your brand values are. Are those being represented in your product? And then, when they are represented properly, hopefully you're going to have a very good brand in the market. I hope you found this I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please hit like. Thanks for listening.